Hi, Jyoti.
Hey, how are you, Zach?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Hang on, let me get the video going here.
There we go.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you. Finally, nice to meet you.
Yeah, like as in person as we can possibly get.
Exactly, as close as we can get right now. How's things
Yeah,
been for you?
busy,
Yeah,
busy, busy.
busy is
Yeah,
a
how
good
about
thing,
you?
isn't it?
Busy is a very good place to be right now. It keeps you distracted from everything that's going on.
Absolutely. How has it been mentally for you dealing through obviously what we've all gone through this past year and coming out and saying, hey, I'm going to run? Because that's a tough job.
It is, but you know what? Mentally, I think all of us have to be very honest with ourselves and with each other this past year. It's taken a toll on everyone. It's taken a toll on every individual, every family. So I think I've seen more people reaching out and saying, I'm not okay today. I need to take a break, or, I could really use a hand up. And that is incredibly heartwarming to see that people are okay to say those things. And I think once we come out of this thing, if we take those lessons to heart and we focus on our mental health, boy, that would be a great thing to see.
Our city, and it's evidently clear now that mental health and substance abuse has been on a rise. What are ways that, if you become mayor, you can help bring the awareness out and obviously aid individuals that are struggling?
Yeah, Zach, addiction and mental health issues are things that we haven't talked about very much as a society in the open. And we've tended to treat them like it's somebody else's problem. We'll say that somebody's an addict, or we'll say that, someone is homeless, or we'll make these judgment calls and we'll label people. But, just recently, we have started digging into why that situation has occurred. And we've started talking about people in positions of vulnerability rather than saying vulnerable populations. And I think it's once we have that realization that anybody could be in that situation that we start focusing on what the problem is and what we can do to make things better. So, we have to talk about things like harm reduction, because it's not just those people that are suffering with addiction. It's people we know. It's not just people that are on the streets. These are people in homes in our neighborhoods. So this has to be something that we understand is something unhealthy for our society. And it's our friends and neighbors and family that are suffering. So let's be more open about it. Let's discuss what we can do.
And they're covering it up with a smile oftentimes.
Yes, you will see a lot of people, say after someone has tragically died by suicide, oh, she was always so happy, or, oh, he always seemed so well put together. And if you actually have conversations with people who have suicidal ideation or other mental health issues that cause them to believe that, their life would be better if it was not led, they'll tell you that they will put on a smile and they'll put on an act and they'll do what they think they're supposed to do to get through and to not let anybody see inside into the pain that they're feeling. So let's crack open these issues and let's start talking about them so we're not losing people that are near and dear to us.
Mental health and substance abuse also often leads to homelessness. How come we still have that in our city and we spend millions a year dealing with it, yet 1,600 or more are out there still?
Well, this is something that I think definitely needs a spotlight shown on it. There's some very intelligent people from whom I've learned much about homelessness and the attendant problems that come with homelessness. So Ron Kneebone, as an example, is at the School of Public Policy. He does some amazing research, and he has demonstrated through empirical evidence that we're seeing approximately 300 Calgarians a month enter the shelter. That means 300 people that we know in our city every month since 2019 are falling into homelessness. That is not okay on any level, and we need to be understanding what the underlying causes are. The other person from whom I've learned a great deal is Chaz Smith. He's with Be the Change YYC. He does a lot of outreach missions late at night with a group of volunteers, and he makes sure that people who are living rough, sleeping rough, not in shelter, have certain emergency supplies that they need. He's been through homelessness himself. And he has said that, you'll turn to addictions to get you through because you don't want to feel anything. And so I don't think we can have that causation of addiction causing homelessness. I think it's the correlation between the two things that we need to understand, and we just have to be much more compassionate. These are not just other people that we shouldn't worry about. These are our fellow citizens, and we need to help them out.
I walk by the drop-in center often, and I see so many people outside. And from a citizen standpoint, you wonder, all the millions of dollars that we spend each year, the people that are getting paid are the ones that are safe, apparently supposedly running these programs, and it seems like it's not really happening. Can't you find ways to put these people in certain areas so that they're not outside?
Zach, it's an excellent question. When we compartmentalize things, that's when we start to have problems. So we have, one department that's responsible for housing. We have another department that's responsible for poverty, and another that's responsible for addiction, and yet another that's responsible for domestic violence. People are complicated creatures, and their lives are incredibly complex things. And so when you ask people to pull apart the pieces of their life to see how the system can help them, you're not actually looking at the whole. So I think we have to be much better in terms of integrating the services and the supports that people need. If you put a roof over somebody's head, you're doing a very big thing. And it's really important because that's step one. That's why it's called housing first. But if you don't have the other wraparound supports, the other treatment centers, the other, mobile crisis response units, then you're not really taking care of people. You're just sticking them in a unit. And I think we need to get better at integrating those services.
Is there a way, when someone is suicidal, they rarely call the 1-800 line to say, hey, I'm feeling this way? What are some other avenues that we could do as a city to help people that are struggling? Because now more than ever, we're seeing, obviously, the alcohol consumption, the rise of that. We're seeing isolation. How do we help these individuals get through the tough times?
I think what we're seeing now that all of us are in varying stages of isolation, and we've got a lot of time to sit and think about our own thoughts and feelings and the desperation we feel at times. It's made us much more willing to understand what happens with people who are in situations of crisis because of mental health or addiction. And probably the single biggest thing we can do is make sure that access to help is available when the person needs it. If somebody goes to emergency or somebody goes to a crisis center and they're at the stage where they no longer feel like living, if you make them wait 6 hours to get help, or you tell them to come back tomorrow, or if they call into a crisis line and they're on hold for an hour, we haven't helped them. It's the same thing with addictions. When someone makes a decision that they don't want to do this anymore and they seek the treatment and the support, and we say, come back in 6 months, or even come back tomorrow, you have missed your window. And so I think it's important to focus on the timeliness of the treatments and the interventions, and to be there when someone makes that decision that they need some help.
No, for sure. Thank you for that, Jyoti. When you go back and reflect, what made you run for this position?
When I go back and reflect on what made me run in 2017, it's an interesting journey that was completely unintentional. But, there was little pieces of my love for city building that started to emerge and really become evident since about 2007. So that was the first time I ever volunteered on a municipal election campaign. And I just fell in love with this idea that your local government had so much ability to influence your quality of life. And so I started investigating more about what a municipal government does. I had already volunteered with my community association. I then went on to volunteer with Calgary Planning Commission, a couple of other committees of the city so that I could understand how these things work. I also did a lot of research into political economy of cities. I learned a lot about what other cities are doing well. And I had the good fortune of working at the Westman Center for Real Estate Studies within the Haskayne School of Business. And it was a pleasure to bring in experts from the commercial real estate field, from the land development field, and have them be instructors in our classrooms so that our students were actually getting hands-on education from people who would eventually be hiring them. And that's why we had such success with that real estate studies program, because the students and the instructors knew each other. And when people needed to hire somebody, our students were at the front of that line because they'd already met them and they'd built those relationships. So when I look back at all of those things that I'd done, I realized that I'd been slowly trying to influence changes to city building from the outside. And I wanted to get in there and actually be a decision maker. So that's what drove my run in 2017. And now that I've had just over 3 years of being on council, I can see where the system could be adapted to be more nimble. And I can see where some of our processes don't work anymore. They're old processes that haven't changed over time. And I can see how our city can present itself with a bold reputation and show the world that we are progressive, we're interested in innovation, and we are very much interested in taking our history, our strength in things like agriculture and energy production, and moving that towards the transition to be more sustainable and future focused. That's the work I want to do. And so in late November of 2020, I decided that I had the competencies and the desire to lead the city. And I put my name forward in January, and here I am.
And here you are. So, Jyoti, this election is so important. And, we've said that before in every election. It's a cliche word we always hear or phrase, but I do believe it. Our world is so divided right now. People are so angry. They're exhausted. They want to get back to work. Do you believe in small businesses?
Oh, I believe that small businesses are everything to an urban center, to a small town. It does people who have chosen to make a livelihood out of serving the citizens of that place. And so I think it's very important to understand what we can do as a local government to make life better, not only for our citizens, but for our local businesses by giving them the opportunity to adapt and change in these pandemic times, in this downturn economy. How do we help them be nimble and responsive if we can't be nimble and responsive ourselves as a government? So I think, we've learned from the lessons of the pandemic that overregulation is not a good thing, and that supports that are meaningful are critical at this conjuncture in our city.
I mean, small business can go to city programs or city grants or provincial grants, but we have a hard time getting through as small businesses and entrepreneurs because the people that are in those departments are not entrepreneurs, they're not business owners, and there's red tape after red tape after red tape. Do you think city council needs to be trimmed in terms of its fat and become lean and agile and productive instead of having these, I don't know, I call them like the bloated individuals in the cubicle that are not, they're there too long. Let's say that.
Yeah, I think there's two significant things that need to happen at your local government level. I think first of all, we need to encourage a culture where people who work within the city understand that it's all right to take a risk and it's okay to try something different. And if it doesn't work, it's not a failure. It's an attempt at bringing about positive change that just didn't work. So let's learn from it and move on. If you're only instilling this sense of right or wrong, and people feel that they're going to get punished for taking a chance, they don't take chances. So I want to make sure our culture is one that rewards the risk takers that are doing it for the right reason. I think that's, one of the first things we need to do. And the second one is to get out of our own way. We don't need all of the regulations that we have in place. We don't need some of the silly policies that we have. I mean, there's this one condition that I call the fun sucker condition. And it's been around for a very long time. I remember questioning it when I was a planning commissioner. And that is, you can't have speakers on a patio. And so my point was, what's the fun of hanging out on a patio if you can't listen to some music? Like, why do we have this fun sucker condition? And so we learned how to work around that condition by saying there's already a noise bylaw that will take care of any excess noise. So sometimes you just have to challenge the things that are there and ask for them to be made better in the interest of someone trying to earn a livelihood.
As a mayoral candidate, do you believe in the increase of property taxes?
anyone who's running for this position needs to understand very clearly how the property tax system works. How does assessment work? How do mill rates work? How does proportional share of your operating budget work? And that's not something that you're going to learn on the fly. That is not something that you're going to learn in orientation week. That requires a lot of in-depth understanding of the process and the numbers. In 2019, I asked a question about who's responsible for the proportional share of the budget. And that's when it became evident that over time, we had downloaded 55% of the responsibility for the operating budget to our business community through non-residential taxes. So when things started to get bad in 2014 and increasingly got worse, it's because when oil and gas started leaving our city and we had vacancies in our buildings, the value of those buildings started to depreciate. That depreciating value translates. So when times were good, we offloaded the burden to non-residential properties. And when times got bad, we didn't fix that proportion. In late 2019, we finally did fix that proportion to be 48% responsibility to non-res and 52 to residential properties, because there's 500,000 residential properties in this city that could shoulder that burden easier than the businesses that we have. So taxation is incredibly complicated, and I hope everybody understands everything they need to about this.
What is your thoughts on city art and purchasing non-local art?
Here's what I think about the public art program as it existed. It was an effort to make sure that we had the types of things in this city that anyone would want to see, to have an enjoyable.
Sorry, Jyoti, 1 second, you're cutting out here.
Art, and you do notice the things that are engaging about their city. So we had this program in place that was intended to do the same thing for Calgary. Do I think it should be managed by administrators rather than people with an expertise in this area? Not necessarily. And I think the move that we've made now to have the experts understand what it is about public art that people really do take up and make those decisions on behalf of the city, I think that's a smart move. I think the other thing is, like I said, we've got these policies and practices that limit what we can do. It makes no sense to me that you have to have a certain percent of an infrastructure project go towards public art, but then that public art has to be on that piece of infrastructure where no one can engage with it. That makes no sense. Mm-hmm. So we need to question how we came up with the policies and make them better. But I think a city without public art.
Oh.
Did you lose me? Am I back?
I did for a second. You were saying the city with public and then you cut out.
Okay. You know, at the end of the day, a city without public art is a city without soul. So you have to get the program right, but you do absolutely need an investment in public art.
Many Calgarians are confused that we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the blue ring and, you know, those iron rods that stick out. Do you agree that the blue ring or the iron rods that are not provincial art or Canadian art should be supported here when we don't even spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on local artists? You know, yes, we have the murals, but I'll tell you, those artists did not get $480,000 for their hard work. We have the best tradesmen in Alberta, and they need jobs. Well, you don't think they could have made the blue ring?
So I think two really interesting things have happened on this council while I've been serving on it. And that is people raising the question of, are we doing this right? Mm-hmm. And how are we using local talent? We have actually made a move now towards benefits-driven procurement, and procurement that shows how it is that we're actually helping the local economy, how it is that we're actually practicing, you know, sustainable procurement processes. What are we doing to make our community better? So I think that was a really big step in understanding the role that procurement plays in things like public art. And I think the second thing is that we need to make sure the public is aware that we must run competitions that are open globally because we have certain standards we need to meet through NAFTA. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that Canadian talent and local talent can't compete. We can. And I agree with you. We have some amazing artists here. We have some amazing trades here. And we'll make sure that those processes are open for those folks because we do want to promote local.
Do you believe we should wait in pushing the city's guidebook until the new council comes in?
I think the guidebook conversation was a really interesting one. Given that we spent 5 years doing engagement with the communities that would be immediately impacted, and those are the communities that need local area plans done very quickly, I think we got to a point where we had talked about the guidebook for so long with so many folks, we became comfortable that everybody understood what it was. And we became very comfortable with our understanding of the land use bylaw and what we were trying to do. And I think perhaps that's where we had a misstep. And I think in the public hearing process, that's what really came out. So when we have our next meeting of Planning and Urban Development Standing Policy Committee on May the 5th, we will make sure that the public is aware that they were heard during the public hearing and during the 5 years of engagement. And we will take a step back from the things that we assumed and make it very clear and transparent what the intent of the guidebook is. And I think people will see that we got caught up in whether or not it should be a statutory document. And that's really not the primary concern. If the guidebook can be a policy document that informs the local area plan, which is what it was intended to do, it doesn't need to be statutory, because that local area planning process is where residents can get engaged, they can get involved, and they can determine with the administration the future of their community. That then comes to council and becomes statutory. So I think we need to explain that. And I think we also need to explain to the folks that were very worried that we were eliminating single detached homes as a category. The reason it's not in the guidebook is because the land use bylaw includes R1 as a district. We made the assumption that that would be clear to everyone. It wasn't. So now we will make sure that in the guidebook it states that the R1 district, the single detached home, is not eliminated by any means. So I think we learned a lesson in how to be a bit more clear in our intent.
How can we stimulate the economy and at the same time revitalize downtown Calgary?
I think one of the best documents I've seen in a long time is the Greater Downtown Plan that came to council just this past week. And I think the thing that's great about that plan is it wasn't driven by administration alone. We have some great members within city administration that partnered with the private sector and the social services sector and community leaders and came up with a strategy that's going to work for everyone. So when you have Calgary Economic Development and the Calgary Chamber and owners of major properties downtown come to you and say, this is the way to do it. We got this right because we all talked about our common interests and we figured out a path on how to really make this work. I believe in that plan. I think it's strong, and I think we have to stay steady and true and execute on it. That's the way we will make our comeback.
Taxpayers are upset about all the millions that we spend on, the arena, the Green Line, but no projects ever get complete in City Council. No one can come up with the decision and stick with it. Why is this happening, Jyoti?
You know what happens sometimes is that we do an amazing project and it's done and everyone forgets and no one celebrates it anymore. The Central Library is a really good example. It was a project that came in on time and under budget, and it's beautiful. It's been recognized globally for being an amazing facility. It's so much more than just a library. It really is a place where people can come and gather. Newcomers have the opportunity to really integrate with the city. It's open to kids, it's open to seniors. It is just an amazing place. And that's something that the previous council delivered on. I think there's been
successes. Look at the Green Line and the arena. That's where the
when you look at some other major projects that include partnerships with other orders of government or private sector partners, that's when things become a little bit complicated. So with the event center, we have a deal that's been in place since July of 2019. The agreements were signed in December of that year. It's a good deal. We're willing to give $275 million plus land to make sure that the event center comes to life. And that's the deal we have before us right now. When it comes to the Green Line, we had 3 orders of government that committed dollars to making that north-south rapid transit spine happen. You cannot have a great city without a strong public transit network. All 3 orders of government believed in it at the time. We now have one partner who has some technical issues. No one knows what they are, But they've held up the project for so long, we missed a construction cycle. And my fear is we will be escalating in cost at the same time that they are not making a decision. So I wish I could tell you why the Green Line's held up. Not a clue.
You were supposed to have a virtual debate the other day, actually a couple times now, and the other candidates don't show up. Why is this the case, Jyoti?
So it was a day kind of like this one. I had my headphones on. I was waiting my turn to come onto a local radio station to speak with the interviewer. One of my competitors was up before me speaking to the same interviewer and speculating on things that, as a member of council, our code of conduct says that you shouldn't speculate on. The oath of office is important to me. It's significant. And when I hear somebody else on council violating it, that's a problem. So that's why that day I tweeted out, why not just have a debate? Because I think it's important for Calgarians to see how two people who have served on council have very different perspectives based on their understanding of our moral and ethical obligations. I'm out there saying I can't comment on this for reasons of confidentiality, for reasons of a quasi-judicial board weighing in on a decision, and I can't be interfering. And you've got my competitor willfully ignoring this. So let's have a debate. Let's talk about it. That's what I was going for.
What was the topic under, or what was it regarding, the violation?
So in one situation, it was speculation on the event center, and the other situation was a development permit. And both of those situations were ones where our legal department advised us that you don't want to be caught in a conflict. Please don't comment on these things.
So if an individual is doing that, or a competitor, isn't that just a red flag already for Calgarians?
In my opinion, it should be a very big red flag when someone doesn't understand what code of conduct and the oath of office means. No, that's my opinion.
Jyoti, when you look at all of your competitors, what makes you different, and why should Calgarians choose you?
Well, rather than compare myself to others, because, that's
the worst thing to do.
That's the worst thing to do. Yeah. I think the best thing I can tell Calgarians is that when I took this decision to run, I didn't do it lightly. I stopped and thought about, whether I have the qualifications, whether I have the experience. How did I get into this position? Do I still have the passion for it? And I can tell you that I believe that I've learned enough about the systems and processes and what needs to be changed that I will hit the ground running. My first 100 days in office will not be spent learning things because I already know them. And I came in very fresh in 2017 with a pretty good idea of what I wanted to deliver on. I've had some of those successes. Some will take a little bit longer. And I think it's important to have a leader who has enough experience with the system, but still wants to make good change happen in that seat. And that's what I really want to do. I want to show the world that Calgary is back. We are back in action. I want to get us to a point of stability so that we can then pursue opportunity and prosperity and demonstrate how inclusive and progressive we are as a city.
Do you see a virtual debate going on with the various competitors in the near future?
Well, I think there's a situation in this election that we've never seen before, and that's that we can't be together in the same room. Like even you and I'd much rather be sitting beside you than on this screen.
The mic right here to set up for somebody else, but yeah, I'm with you.
But we can't have friends in the same room. So I think you are going to see virtual settings, whether it's a debate or a conversation between candidates. I do believe that's going to have to happen. I think people have also forgotten that there's the potential for a federal election. And if that happens, all eyes are going to be on this federal election and no one's going to be interested locally. So it's important to get out early and stay strong and deliver your message about why this municipal election is so important and why you are a strong candidate. Because people have, as you said, one of the biggest decisions of their life to make on October 18th. Mm-hmm. And somehow other orders of politics are going to interfere with that. So let's make sure we're raising awareness of the municipal election early and often and doing it in a virtual setting until we know that it's safe to emerge from the pandemic and be in person.
What's your thoughts on building inwards or instead of outwards?
Well, I think one of the things that we get caught up on, Zach, is this word density. Yeah. And we talk about how to densify. And I think if we could just, peel the layer back on that terminology, what we're trying to do is really activate a place with more people. Whether it's people living there or people coming to the amenities that we've put in that place, we're trying to drive the number of people we have in that particular place. And you accomplish that by having different types of housing mix so that different types of families and individuals can live there. So, sometimes we talk about density as units per acre, right? Like, do you have 8 units per acre? Do you have 12? Do you have 20? And we tend to think the more you have, the better it is. But I would remind people that units are only as valuable as the people who live in them. So if you have 10 people living in a single detached home versus a fourplex where it's only singles, have you really achieved the density that you wanted to? I think it's much more interesting to talk about how do we get people to live in places to make them sustainable than constantly be focused on this numbers game of density that only looks at units and not the people behind it.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Jyoti, for your time.
You've already mentioned, Zach, that this municipal election is probably going to be the most important one in a generation. And I think it's definitely because we're coming out of an economic slump, we're coming out of a pandemic. It is a time to be positive and show the world what it is the city can do, but it's also a time to be vigilant. So remember, you have to choose a school board trustee. That is someone you're entrusting with your kid's future. That's critical. You have to choose a city councillor. That's someone that represents the needs of your communities. That is also critical. And you have to choose a leader in the form of a mayor who can demonstrate to the world what our city is all about. So choose wisely, do your research, and please do not forget to vote on October 18th.
Awesome. Thanks so much again, Jyoti.
Thank you very much for your time. Take care.
All right. We'll chat soon.